Hi, I'm Leena Rao, and welcome to our Ask a VC show where we put VCs in the hot seat. I'm joined by Ron Palmeri, founder of MkII Ventures this week. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you.
Excited to have you on the show. I want to go over just a little bit of your bio before we start. So you founded MkII Ventures, which is a startup incubation company builder. You previously were the managing director at MkII Ventures, which is responsible for hits like GrandCentral, which is basically the underlying technology behind Google Voice, OpenDNS, which is still alive and well and doing pretty well, Scout Labs, social media monitoring platform acquired by Lithium. It's interesting to have you on the show because you're not a traditional VC.
Right.
You're a company builder, which is something that I recently wrote about a few weeks ago. But I'm curious, why company builders? Like, why is that happening right now? Why are we seeing, the obvious corpse, the MkII Ventures?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been interesting because, I mean, for me and with MkII, it was a little bit of an accident. We started to look at companies and then decided that it'd be more interesting, I think, to start companies that were very specifically in the markets we wanted. But that was in 2005. So we kind of built the model. It actually became the only thing we did. We didn't make any other investments outside of the companies that we started. And at the time, it was pretty different. So I ended up, luckily, because we had cash to be able to do our thing, we didn't need to go out and convince the market it was the right thing to do. But I think the model was very successful, and I think other people have been very successful with it since.
Yeah, so what did you learn in your experience as a company builder? Because you did that, at MkII. Now you started your own firm, MkII. So what's the biggest learning experience you had from that?
Well, I think it comes from having a strong point of view. I think there are some investors that are extremely successful. I mean, certainly Andreessen Horowitz has a very strong point of view. I mean, we've been talking about the e-commerce 2.0 stuff that they're investing behind. I mean, we had a very strong point of view about where companies should be in the market, and we didn't really pay much attention to what other people thought or did. We just did what we thought was the right thing.
So what's the view with MkII?
Well, so for me, I mean, it comes down to really imagining a very specific product in a very specific market, and then kind of going through a process to make sure that that is worth doing. Because when you build companies, you're really the most precious commodity you have is time, and it's how much time you can spend on things. It's the opportunity costs of doing the wrong thing or too many things, and so it really creates a really strong discipline to make sure you're doing what is the most interesting stuff for you.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you a little bit about one of the companies that you've incubated or supported. It's called Prism Skylabs. They were actually a TechCrunch Disrupt.
Yep.
They launched there a few years back, backed by Andreessen Horowitz, SV Angel. And they're really focusing in on taking video surveillance and creating meaningful data from that for retailers. So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, that was the first one of the companies that I did. I did it with Steve Russell, who's the CEO, a phenomenal entrepreneur. And really, it kind of came down to Steve and I really coming up with what we thought was a very interesting way to use existing infrastructure that was there for surveillance and completely repurpose it to drive business value for the company. So it was very much that exercise of thinking about a product, thinking about a market, and doing something we thought would be very compelling. So, and I think Prism certainly fit that category.
So how much of company building then is about the entrepreneur? Because Steve is a proven, talented person in that space, in the video surveillance space. What are you thinking? Is it about the entrepreneur, is it about the idea, or is it a little bit of
Well,
both?
it's totally both. I mean, I think one of the things that I like is working with somebody as experienced and capable as Steve, and sort of being his wingman and kind of helping build the business. I do recruiting. I kind of generally sort of help. Drove a lot of the fundraising as well, so the team could just focus on executing. But I also like working with younger entrepreneurs that don't have the experience, and there you can often just help them not kill themselves in the first year, and I think that really raises the probability of success for the business. So it's really kind of both.
Well, I want to switch over to some of our reader questions.
Okay.
And this is an interesting one for you because I feel like, with your experience across the board with enterprise and software and hardware, so one reader's question is, how does the evaluation process for a hardware startup at the early stage differ from a software startup?
Well, I mean, I think the interesting thing now is because of things like iPhones and Nests and those things, people have gotten a lot more comfortable with the idea of an integrated hardware-software device. I still think it comes down to clearly imagining what that product is and understanding how it's going to get into the market. I think that's a relatively, consistent way you have to think about a product, whether it's a cloud product or a software product, an app. It doesn't really matter. The hardware stuff, I mean, I think you get into issues of manufacturing costs and distribution. So I think there's a lot of people that talk about like I'm a product markets guy, but I've heard plenty of people that are distribution guys. They talk about it doesn't matter what the product is, understand the distribution. I think it's a little trickier with hardware to understand your distribution model. People have been using Kickstarter as an example of a way to kind of not only fund it but also get that first bunch of customers. So there are different options for hardware, I think, than pure software.
Right. So with Kickstarter, hardware makes sense because then you automatically have a built-in set of customers that
you would think. Although I've heard Kickstarter is sort of less interested in being the hardware marketplace now. So maybe something else will emerge as that. But I do think I think there are significant differences. But I think in the main, imagining the product, understanding the market, and making sure you've got the mechanisms to get it there, I think is still sort of the general rule, whether it's hardware or software.
Would you incubate a hardware startup?
I've been playing around with an idea. I mean, for me, it would be a learning experience. It's something I haven't done, which is why I'd be interested in doing it. I also think it might be sort of an adjunct to another business that I'm already working on. But yeah, I mean, I think there are guys that are exceptionally good at hardware, and that hasn't been my traditional experience. So
well, stay tuned. I'm interested to see what you're thinking through. Our next question from a reader is more about the early stage, but how do you get angels and VCs interested and hooked on your idea when you're pre-revenue? I mean, can you get them hooked on your idea?
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of the huge benefits of being in this area, being San Francisco, the Valley, whatever, is because there is such a phenomenal base of really talented seed stage investors. These are people who have started their own companies or just generally know the drill. And so I think that they look for credibility with the team. I think they look for clarity again in the product and the market. Generally, there are guys that are comfortable with things that are pre-product because they can see the plan and they can understand it. I think other people like to be a little bit later stage where it's a bit more tangible. But there's just such a large number of incredibly high quality early stage investors that if you can get to them and share what is a good plan and a good team, I think you can usually find good investors.
Going back to the company building thing, and Ev Williams had called this what he calls parallel entrepreneurship. So you're sort of working next to another entrepreneur, maybe someone who's experienced like Steve, but maybe someone who's not. What are the challenges in that?
Well, I think so. My model has always been the team is a freestanding, perfectly capable team on its own, and I try to be additive and supportive, and the peripheral vision or maybe the air cover, depending on how you want to think of it. It really does come down to the team being able to build the product and the company and succeed. So I look at it as how can I augment and assist. And so, again, GrandCentral, phenomenal company. Craig Walker and Vincent Pecquet were the two founders there. In a year and a half, built an incredible product and thing, and that Google wanted to acquire. That was those guys were amazing. I think David Yulovich, who's still the founder and CEO of OpenDNS over the years, has built an incredible team and an incredible product. I mean, I like to think that I was very helpful. I mean, I always kind of talk about it as helping start. Now it's the studio model or builders or whatever, whatever you call it. I think the best way to do it is to just be of assistance and really help the company succeed in any way necessary.
What space right now are you most excited about? Because you've got now a little bit of the retail e-commerce with Prism. So what space are you eyeing?
Yeah. So I mean, I think obviously mobile and cloud is the way. It's sort of like saying HTML is useful or whatever. So that's kind of a given. But I mean, I love communications products. I love
so like email overload or messaging.
It's sort of stay tuned.
A little bit of both.
Stay tuned.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think sort of human digital communication is such. Well, human communication in general is such a basic thing, But when you get into the digital space, I think there's too much technology in the way, and I think one of the things I'm really seeking to do is try to get some of that out of the way to make communications much simpler, more scalable, easier. Just that. So it's sort of been a many-year passion of mine to do that. So.
Well, hopefully we can have you back in the studio when you're ready to launch that.
Certainly hope so.
Okay, thanks, Ron.
Okay, thanks for having me.